my fellow readers. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky, where I talk about the literature and the history of the American West. At least that's where I start, and then I gallop off into whatever direction I feel like. I've been participating in Spring into Adventure, an event on BookTube. It goes through April and May, where you read a whole bunch of books that are adventure books, both fiction and nonfiction. There are some suggested rules that I may or may not be paying attention to. But I read a series here just recently, a set of books that had a similar theme, and it really surprised me. And I wanted to talk about that today. So the books are Jerry Enzler's biography of Jim Bridger called Trailblazer of the American West. That was written in 2021. And I did a full video on that book, a full review earlier. The other was Arthur Conan Doyle's book, Studying Scarlet, the first Sherlock Holmes novel, came out in 1887. And finally, Zane and Riders of the Purple Sage, which came out in 1912. Now, as I explore the theme, the secret theme, as I explore this, I am going to give major spoilers for Studying Scarlet. If you haven't read A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, you might want to skip this video for now, put it in your watch later list, go out and read A Study in Scarlet, which you should do, and then come back and watch the video. If you don't think you're ever going to read it and you want to hear the spoilers, that's fine. But I'm telling you right now, I'm going to spoil the book. I'm going to tell you everything about it. So beware. That's all I have to say about that. Some of you may have guessed the secret theme already. It's Mormonism. I thought I'd start with talking about Jim Bridger and that biography, which of course is a nonfiction book. It is a biography, and so there is less that's subjective thoughts and ideas. Of course, some of that's there, but it's really based on facts, certainly written with a bit of a bias toward Jim Bridger, who is the focus of the biography. And it didn't so much focus on the entire Mormon establishment, but really just Brigham Young. Because Brigham Young was both the head of the LDS Church and the territorial governor of Utah. And he was very much in favor of a large independent state that he wanted to call Deseret. And he had a lot of opposition to U.S. authority. Jerry Enzler, the author of this biography of Bridger, does paint him somewhat negatively, but like I said, he's talking about Jim Bridger, who is the hero of our story in this biography. So I think that's understandable, but do remember there could be some bias here. What we do know and what the book presents, Jim Bridger, as the Mormons were coming out west, Jim Bridger mapped out the Salt Lake Valley for them, for Brigham Young, and helped them establish the site of what would become Salt Lake City. As new Mormon settlers came out and new communities were established, Jim Bridger at the time was running Fort Bridger, which was on the Oregon Trail, and he started losing commerce to the Mormon settlements. In 1853, so the Mormons came out in 1847, so just a few years later, 1853, Jim Bridger was accused of aggravating hostilities with the native tribes and causing the natives to attack the Mormons. This was not necessarily a true thing. But that's what they accused him of. And because of that accusation, they revoked his license for the trading post at Fort Bridger and also put out a warrant for his arrest. Bridger ended up leaving, and he was forced to sell the fort to the Mormons. He would claim it was stolen, and while they did pay him for it, it certainly was a forced sale that Bridger was not in full agreement with. It was just the position he was in. So then later, 1857, 4 years later, Brigham Young forbids any outside forces from coming into Utah, and he declares martial law, which then brings the United States and the U.S. Army fully into the conflict. And Bridger is the one who was guiding General Albert Sidney Johnston's troops. There was a point where the Mormons destroyed 52 of the Army's supply wagons. And the Mormons also burnt Fort Bridger to try to stop Johnston. And there's a lot more that happens, but that's really the gist of it. That's a lot of the crux of what happened between Brigham Young and the Mormons and Jim Bridger. So definitely not a positive light for the Mormons in this biography. I'm going to switch now to A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle. Again, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I'm going to tell you the whole plot of this novel. If you haven't read it, again, push pause, put this in your watch later playlist, and then go read A Study in Scarlet and come back. That's the best way to do it. Here's the plot. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, this is when they first meet. This is the first case that Watson goes on. This was written in 1887. And there are two murders that happen in London. The victims are both American, named Joseph Stangerson and Enoch Drebber. And Holmes, the first part of the book is Holmes investigating the case and doing all of his deduction and all of his reasoning and all the things that Holmes does so well. And he ends up inviting the killer up to the apartment at 221 Baker Street, where Special Lestrade is waiting, and Holmes tricks him into coming, puts him in handcuffs, and he gets arrested, and the murder's solved. And you're wondering, after the first half of the book as a reader, what in the world just happened? How, I don't understand how any of this is connected. And that means we go to part 2, which is set in Utah. And this starts quite a few years earlier, probably 3 decades before, where there's a wagon train that is crossing the salt flats, which is a horrible place, the Great Alkali Plain. No water for miles and miles, days and days. And a lot of people perished in that stretch of the trail trying to go that route to get to California. And in the novel, there are two survivors of a wagon train, an older man named John Ferrier and a very young girl named Lucy. The Mormon wagon train comes in and rescues them, and I say rescue with some intended quotation marks around it, because they say, yeah, we'll give you food and water and help you out if you become a Mormon, which is not really a choice. When the choice is become a Mormon or die, it's kind of tea and cake or death. So of course, John Ferrier agrees. He becomes a Mormon, and he lives in the way that the Mormons ask him to, with really one exception. He does not raise Lucy, who he really adopts as his daughter. He does not raise Lucy as a Mormon. And when she grows up, she meets a man named Jefferson Hope, who saves her from a stampede of cattle. And she falls in love with Jefferson. Jefferson falls in love with Lucy. Very nice. We know this is not going to turn out well, because the Mormons have already decided who Lucy should marry. So the choice she's given is between two men, Joseph Stangerson and Enoch Drebber. Those names might be familiar from part 1. Both of them already have wives, and so Lucy would be part of a polygamous marriage. She's not interested, plus she's in love with Jefferson. So Lucy and John Ferrier and Jefferson Hope escape, run away, get past the Mormon guards at the various guard points, checkpoints, but they don't get very far before the Mormons are chasing after them. While Jefferson is out hunting, trying to find some meat for them to eat, the Mormons catch up with John Ferrier and Lucy. They kill John Ferrier, murdered, and Lucy is kidnapped and taken back and forced to marry Enoch Drebber. Lucy only lives for about a month because of her broken heart, and Jefferson Hope knows what happened, and he begins a 2-decade chase of Stangerson and Drebber. And so Sherlock Holmes, it does all the right investigations and stuff. We find this in the wrap-up of the story that moves back to London, and conversations between Holmes and Watson. And of course, the killer who Holmes has identified and brought into 221 Baker Street is indeed Jefferson Hope, who is there in revenge for what Stangerson and Drebber did to Lucy. So, what does all this mean? Arthur Conan Doyle was in England when he was writing this book. It's set in London, but in the Victorian era, in England, really the attitude was that the Mormons were just about plural marriage and violence. Doyle never been to America when he wrote this story, but he is drawing from the ideas of the age and the people around him. This is in the 1880s. When the story was published, the English audiences didn't see any problem with this portrayal of Mormons. Certainly there's some stereotyping going on, but this is what the Victorians in England were thinking about the American Mormons. there were some mixed ideas because in general, the English Victorians, they did not like polygamy. That's bad. But the way the Mormons were moving into the West, that Anglo-Saxon colonization of parts of the world that were not Anglo-Saxon, they admired that. These ideas are more hinted at by Doyle than outright explained, but certainly the actions of the Mormons in the story reflect this idea. The other idea that was shared and that I think Doyle definitely points to by behaviors more closely is the idea of restoring a biblical theocracy, which is what the Mormons were doing. And it really was, just like I referred to with when John Ferrier and Lucy are rescued by the Mormon wagon train, it's do what the church says or die. Those are the options. So then we go to Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey, written in 1912. Again, in this book, the Mormons are the bad guys. The story starts with Jane, who is the daughter of a Mormon. She's the only child and she's the survivor when her father dies, and so she inherits the entire ranch that her father had. So she has thousands of cattle and thousands of acres of land and springs and water and all kinds of wealth, really. And she believes in her Mormon faith. She was taught by a bishop. She is Mormon in almost every way, but she is a strong enough, independent woman that she refuses to marry the man who the church has decided she should marry. She's spending time with one of her ranch hands named Venters, and the man she's supposed to marry, Tull comes out with a bunch of riders, and they've already told Venters to leave, and he hasn't, and so they are going to, they're going to horsewhip him and maybe just flat out kill him. It's hard to tell it, but whatever it is, it's bad. That's when Lassiter rides in and is able to, because of his known skills with guns, he's able to chase off Tull and his riders. And he is looking for someone who was kidnapped by Mormons from another state, from Texas. Now I can't even remember. I think from Texas. And so then the plots intertwine, but it really is about this woman, Jane, who is trying to both be true to her faith. She still prays and she still goes to services and she still listens to the Mormon leaders, but there are some things that are just things she can't do. She's very generous with her money, with her wealth. She takes care of a lot of the Gentiles. That's anybody who's not a Mormon. She takes care of a lot of the Gentiles in the local town. She's trying to live a good life and trying to live up to what she believes are her Mormon values. And until the church seems to come in the way, she continues to pursue that. The the way that the Mormons are stereotyped by Zane Grey really follow very clear gender lines. Basically, the men are all bad and the women are all good. The men are either leaders of the church who are telling people to do what are sometimes horrible things, or they're followers of the leaders who do whatever they're told, whether it seems to be right or not, because if the church says it's right, then it's right. The women are portrayed as being very faithful, very committed to Mormonism, being very committed to that religion and that spirituality. And if they are oppressed, most of them just say this is how it is, but they are treated as very much innocent and at the same time very strong in their faith, which the men aren't so much. The men are just portrayed as giving or following orders. There are hints at some solutions. One, of course, is to just run away and remove oneself from the Mormon communities and the Mormon influence. There's also a kind of a dream, an idea of finding a place where women who are in plural marriages can get away from their husbands and live in a more communal way amongst other women who may have been treated the same way. And that's kind of, again, it's separating from the Mormon communities. That seems to be the main solution that Grey offers through his characters in Riders of the Purple Sage. There also is a really strong feeling against proselytizing. I think he says proselytizing. I would say proselytizing. It's the same thing. He did not like Mormons going out, particularly into other Christian denominations and trying to convert other Christians to Mormonism. That was something that really bothered him. This is obviously not the only time that Zane Grey wrote about Mormons. It was the first big piece of writing that really focused on Mormons and really presented Mormons in this way. And over the years, his thoughts about Mormons would become much more nuanced and the characters would become more complex. But this is where he started. And it's not that much different from Arthur Conan Doyle, who was writing 40 years earlier, but very similar ideas of what's good and bad about Mormons. And the main thing is that whatever the church says, you have to do. So my final thoughts in this really long video. I know here in America, there are plenty of people who are worried about the rise of Christian nationalism and the move toward Christian theocracy. The ideas of Project 2025 are definitely worrisome for many, if not most, Americans. Some people who are worried think about the model for theocracy to be close to what Margaret Atwood wrote about in The Handmaid's Tale and the Testament. And while those are certainly things to look out for, I really think that if we have a Christian nationalism or a Christian theocracy here in America, it will look more like what the Mormons had, or at least the perception of the Mormon control of Utah. The teachings of the church and the politics are paired. They are led by the same people. They are imposed by the same people. And I think this is a great time, particularly in America, but in other places, to look at a book, particularly Riders of the Purple Sage, which has some ideas of certainly what Zane Grey thought had gone wrong in Utah, but also as what might go wrong in the U.S. I think it's good to be thinking about these things and to be looking for whatever possible solutions there are, and running away might not be the best thing. Anyway, this has been a really long video, the longest video I've ever put together. I had a lot of thoughts about this, and it was just serendipity that these 3 books that I read for Spring into Adventure all dealt with Mormons, and I thought it was worth putting a video together, comparing, contrasting, looking at these 3 books and seeing how it might apply to us today. And if you got this far, thank you for listening to this long set of thoughts, some meanderings, some rambling, but also some things I've been really contemplating seriously for this last week or so. Thank you for being part of this channel. Thank you to those of you who subscribe and who like and who comment. I do appreciate that. There'll be more Spring into Adventure coming up because that event lasts through May. But until next time, my name is Greg. This is Ghost Readers in the Sky. Keep on reading and rereading.